Okay. Well, Karen works on that. If you could put those into the chat as they come through, so that we can go ahead and move the meeting forward. Thank you all. Review and adjustment to the agenda. Our first order of business to review today's agenda. I'd like to propose that we remove a section of the agenda that I had put in error, and that would be section 7B. To move or take action on that. I prefer that, like the other things that we've brought forward, that the feedback loop is completed, and then we possibly take action on it at the next meeting if the board so desires. So this would be discussion and questions today. Then you would take that back to your organizations, review it with them, and then come back ready to make any adjustments or vote on it at the next meeting. So barring any objection to removing that, we will remove that from section 7, items requiring action B. All right, saying no objection. The agenda stands with it also being a flexible agenda so that we can move around for expediency and discussion efficiency. So you'll see some items listed in multiple places because there's a presentation, then discussion, and then possibly action depending on the item. All right, so next on there is an approval of minutes. Everyone received the minutes for August. Are there any corrections or changes to those minutes? Okay, seeing, sorry, go ahead, Shannon.
Yeah, I just think there was a date that was wrong around moving the October 2026 date. It was supposed to be October, I think, 12th. I got to pull up the minutes again, but it was just a date that was wrong.
To October 12th, is that what we're stating?
Yeah, so it was shifting the October 2026 meeting. It should be moving from, I think, the 12th to the 19th, if I was looking at it right.
October 13th was the Monday that it was going to be on, and we're shifting it from the Monday to the next Monday, the 20th.
But if we're talking about 2026, the Mondays are the 19th and the...
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking at 2025, of course.
Yeah.
It should be the 19th, yeah.
Is October. We're changing it from October 12th, 2026 to October 19th, 2026. All right, thank you for that correction. Barring any objection to that correction, we will approve the minutes as they stand with the correction. All right, let's continue moving. Thank you. Let's close the minutes up. And next on our agenda is our administrative announcements. Karen.
Hi, just a brief overview of what I handle in my role as the administrator of the board. As you know, my tasks are identified in the bylaws, specifically what I am accountable for. So I'm not going to read them all to you. I mean, I think everyone is familiar with the bylaws. You know, my primary duties are to record all of the acts of the board and certify them. I'm the custodian of records and papers. I prepare routine business for presentation to the board as may be necessary. I am charged with compiling and publishing under the direction of the board all regulation and acts which may be required. I provide support to establish and amend the board bylaws, draft agendas, and prepare meeting minutes, coordinate meetings and public comments, and collaboratively work with the liaison to the State Board of Education, SBE, and shall perform such duties as the board prescribes. And that includes conducting research and supporting the board chair during meetings by maintaining order through adherence to Robert's Rules of Order pursuant to Article 3, Board Procedures of the bylaws. The rules and the bylaws that are required by law, as well as those about having a quorum and choosing a parliamentary authority, cannot be suspended. Article 3, Section 5, parliamentary authority provides, unless otherwise specified in these bylaws, the board shall conduct its business pursuant to Robert's Rules of Order. I also process board requests to attend Connecticut Legislation and Policy Development Committee meetings, and assist the board chair with preparation of statutorily required reports to the SBE and the CGA Education Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Next is board process. So one, I wanted to thank you all for coming today to our September meeting. As you know, this is our 10th meeting, a regular meeting of the board. We started back in November of last year, and we've had a couple of special meetings in addition to that, as well as many ad hoc meetings. Typically, this would be the start of a new board's year. So I wanted to kind of just go over some of the things that we have done thus far. So we have reviewed and identified obsolete and conflicting regs and statutes, which was submitted to the State Board of Education January 31st. We reviewed state approaches to assessing minimum content knowledge. We had voted on continuing with assessments and then utilizing the bridge option, any future options, and that rollout was recently sent out to you after ETS Bridges followed up on our recommendation that they do an EPP webinar. They provided us with that information on what the rollout's going to be and the information to those EPPs that attended. Develop recommendations as whether alternative approaches should be offered. We were reviewing 7 waivers, and I think we were down to 1 with, I think, a couple that were also submitted to Karen for review at this meeting. We reviewed endorsement areas for development standards and relevancy and adequacy for grade ranges. We'll be hearing a presentation today on birth to 3rd grade. Explored alternative pathways for cross endorsements, which was submitted to SBE in June. And Dr. Ritchie and I will be looking into taking a deep dive into cross endorsements, which we talked about last week together. Additionally, we considered to transfer authority for admissions criteria, and we decided that they already have that authority under current statute. We've developed and approved criteria for alternative pathways and cross endorsements and crosswalked it to CAPE standards. We align the alignment to ed prep degrees with revised endorsement codes. Additional regulation work needs to be done on that, which we have a regs ad hoc working on. Adequacy and relevancy of endorsement codes, combining that 112 and 113 in that birth to 3rd grade, which we'll be hearing about today again. CAPE draft of an MOU with understanding that we can later amend with regulatory work that we have ahead of us. Action to keep the 90 days temporary certification in statute as our programming currently needs it, and pending any changes to their programming might adjust that as well. Website is designed and monitored. We have had a few presentations from Ajit on what the website looks like and the information that is on there. I believe CEPA was going to be reaching out to kind of talk about some additional areas that could potentially go into that area. We did approval of the emergency CERT report that was sent to us by SBE. We have had about 5 to 6 ad hocs in just these 10 months working on these many different things. In addition, we had presentations. We had, let's see, our presentations were from the performance office. We have those here, I believe. Yep. CEPRL did summary of board regulation repeal, minimum content knowledge. SDE Chief of Staff provided us with legal department timelines and legislative process, as well as regulations adoption process. The Performance Office provided us with content area mastery and teacher certification, data update on Bridge pilot, educator preparation and workforce data. There was a CAPE presentation, Praxis and ETS Bridge presentation, birth to grade 3 presentation, SDE study of content area licensure, assessment for teacher certification, review of sunsetting regulations. There are quite a few things that have happened in these past 10 months. And I just want to thank you all as we move into our second year of work. We appreciate all the work that you're doing. We're all here as volunteers, and it's a large responsibility that we've been tasked with. And we appreciate all the work that you are presenting and the lens that you bring to the table. In addition to that, I think I have the regulatory legislative update. I met with Representative Leeper and McCrory, gave a brief overview of some of the work or summaries of the board, as we had discussed earlier in the spring, that we would try to have some meetings throughout the year to kind of keep them apprised of the work of the board. So we talked about the birth to grade 3. They had some questions on that, and I see Representative Leeper on the call. So I'm sure she's interested in hearing about that as today's presentation. We also had the waiver work. We have the sunsetting regulations that we talked about, that we have a regulations group working on now. We have Ajit's presentation that will be happening today as well, on how people become initially certified, and shared info on the Teach Connecticut data that they recently had from that 14 to 18-year-olds and their families, on the things that are happening within there. Representative Leeper asked about the master's program, and I'm sure the board, we actually forwarded the CERT alert, which was prior to 2017-2018 legislation. It was just 30 semester hours that would be presented in order for you to get your certification. Those people were grandfathered in. Anyone who was certified prior to that, and then anyone past 2018, it was a required master's degree is the understanding. And I had forwarded that to both Representative Leeper and McCrory. That legislation came from the legislator. It wasn't from us, obviously. We didn't exist at the time. So thank you for that opportunity. But I think that we could probably convene a group to discuss whether or not we want to go back to the 30 hours that were previously done before 2017, 2018. So there we have it. Rebecca.
That list that you just read from, was that within our kind of 10 documents, or is that something that will be provided?
No, it was just the update that I was given after going through the different reports and what have you. I pulled it directly from the reports that we submitted to SB.
And what have we not done or failed to do or done late?
We have completed all of our tasks and submitted them in thus far. We have a report due January, and then we have 2 additional statutory obligations in July, which are at the top of and the sunsetting regs, which are at the top of our agenda as well.
So as the chair, do you feel like that we've built and streamlined the flexible pathways in the educator profession that are grounded in the commitment to educator effectiveness? Like, have we modernized? Are we done, is what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that we've completed the tasks that we were required through our statutory obligation through Public Act 2441, at least the first half of them, on their deadlines, and that we are continuing work. We currently have a vision ad hoc, which you are chairing. We currently have a regulations ad hoc that is completing the work of the regulations and the sunsetting regulations for the board to bring forth to the board. And then we have another ad hoc that is going to work on section 14. And then Karen and I will start the work on the report to the Education Committee.
And how would we get access to join the additional ad hocs?
The additional ad hoc information is posted on our website for viewing, and I'd be happy to share that with you after the meeting. Okay, thank you. All right, updates. So in terms of process and procedure today, I will be presenting one item on here, and as such, I will be handing over the chair responsibility to Dr. Ritchie for that portion, so that I can be to the side and she can field all of the questions and redirect them, and any of the comments as well. As part of this work, when we are speaking for or against, because we're online, I ask that you type into the chat for, against, or question. Typically, we go back and forth. We should be going back and forth between for or against any particular item. Questions supersede the for or against. So if a question comes up a little bit after, we would go to the question before we'd go back to the for and the against, back and forth. All right. with that in mind, oh, there was one additional thing. SDE, there is a possibility that we could do a retreat for the board, similar to kind of like what SBE does, or on a particular topic that might assist the board in their work moving forward. Karen made me aware of that, and that there is a possibility for the board to kind of explore some ideas on future retreat. So it wouldn't take up one of our usual monthly meetings. It would be in addition to one of our usual monthly meetings. All right. So more information to come on that. Thank you. All right, so that is our regulations ad hoc update. The regulations ad hoc met last Friday. They will be meeting bi-weekly starting on the, let me see, I think I have the time here. Starting on the 19th, I believe. Is that correct, Karen?
Yes, the 19th.
Yeah. Fully meeting on the 19th, bi-weekly. They had their first meeting to identify how often they would like to meet, the purpose of their work, and how they want to kind of tackle the works of the regulations. They are beginning specifically with the sunsetting regulations, also knowing that that might kind of tentacle into other regulations that might need to be addressed as a part of that. So we will go ahead and continue that work, and then start bringing work forward to the board for review and action to be taken on. All right, next is our presentations. Okay, and we are 5 minutes ahead of time. So let's go ahead with the performance office, how educators first become certified in Connecticut. Oh, I'm sorry, Rebecca, go ahead.
I just have about that, back to the ad hocs. I just want to be clear. So are there there's three ad hoc groups now? There's the vision ad hoc group, the regulation ad hoc group, and then did I hear you say a section 14 ad hoc group?
Yeah, so the email just went out to them yesterday and asking for dates and times that would work for their scheduling. Correct.
Did we did we agree to that? How do these ad hoc groups, how did this come about, and how did members were able to volunteer to participate in that?
Great question. Thank you. So according to our bylaws, the ad hoc groups are created by the chair, and people are appointed. And I went through the list to see how many folks had already worked on other ad hocs to try to spread the wealth as much as I could. And as a result, chose some folks to do the regulations ad hoc, and then some other folks to do the section 14 ad hoc.
I have a point of order question.
Sure, Anne, go ahead.
I got the email that I was appointed to the section 14 ad hoc.
Correct.
Now, I'm already on the ad hoc for the vision committee, which I was under the understanding that that was to address section 14. So I feel there's some redundancy in what the purview is of these different ad hocs. And I understand that the bylaws indicate that the chair appoints, but I really feel in the spirit of what we're trying to do here in the collaborative efforts that we're trying to make, that it would make more sense to talk to people about what it is that the ad hoc is meant to do and whose expertise should be brought to the table. So there's sort of 2 points of order. One is, could you clear up for me what the differentiating factor is between both ad hocs, of the vision ad hoc and the one that the section 14? I really don't see the differentiation there, and I'm already on the vision ad hoc, so I feel like it's doubling efforts.
Right. And we had one person who requested to not be on the section 14. So if you'd like to request to not be on, you can send Karen an email in that respect.
I wasn't asking that. I was asking for clarification. I wasn't asking not to be on it. I was asking for clarification of how is that different than what the vision ad hoc is that already exists. And
Well, the
then the
vision ad
second
hoc-
point of order is about how these ad hocs get put together.
So
But the
ad
first
hocs
one
are-
is a clarification.
So the ad hocs are put together based on our bylaws. And what I try to do is ensure that no one is getting stretched thin because we're all volunteers and that we are spreading the wealth out and that we are ensuring that there is representation from like each area within. So whether it's having somebody representing from EPP, an admin, a teacher on the group, an active teacher on the group. So I try to balance out the groups as much as possible. So Karen, as part of the next steps, if you could send over the rosters of all the ad hocs that we've had so far to the members, so that way they can see who's already been on other ad hocs and who currently is. Again, I tried to balance it. I did tally marks to ensure that folks were on there in multiple ways or have already had an opportunity. And if they haven't had an opportunity, that they do have an opportunity to help with the work of the ad hocs and then the board. All right.
Jen, I'm not trying to be obtuse, but that doesn't answer my question. The question is, what's the differentiating factor between the ad hoc for the vision people and the ad hoc for section 14?
Oh, sorry. You had asked two questions. My apologies. So I believe I answered the second one. In terms of the vision one, my understanding of the vision ad hoc was that they were going to do overarching understanding of what we want our students to come out with. And I think there was 4 items that were identified. And then we, this one is speaking specific to the statutory obligation. And I believe there was a note that stated there might be some overlap work with the regs ad hoc as some of the regulations that are being touched by section 14 would continue. All right, thank you. Rebecca,
Yes,
go ahead.
so
And then we're going to move on to the next item. Go ahead, Rebecca.
As chair of the Vision Ad Hoc, it is actually in our purview to cover all of section 14. And so I too would like to just get more clarity on why we need the additional ad hoc group.
We can certainly discuss it at our next vision meeting and see if that falls within that, because I don't recall the CEPRL document speaking directly to that. Kristen Besega?
I mean, it might help to just go over what section 14 is and how that's different from the vision, because the section 14 from the Public Act, if I'm understanding it right, is coming up with the standards for EPP and alternate route certification. So that sounds different than like vision, which is the big overarching idea. Does that answer the question that's going around?
may I
So-
again speak?
So we're going to hold off there. Thank you. I will definitely look into it closer and I will look back at the meeting notes from the Vision Ad Hoc to see what we kind of stated was our work there and revisit the work that CEPRL presented forward to the Vision Ad Hoc. And we will discuss at the next meeting, which I believe is next Monday for the Vision Ad Hoc. And I will ensure that that meeting comes before we schedule anything for section 14.
Jen, may I make a motion, please?
At this time, we are not taking actions. We are in the update section. So if we can move through to presentations, Ajit does have to leave for a meeting at 2 o'clock is my understanding. So I want to ensure that he has time to go over that as part of that. Thank you. All right, Ajit, if you could go ahead.
Okay, thank you. We received a data request from the certification board on numbers and percentage of educators entering our profession. And so we actually convened internally to discuss this. It was not a simple request for a whole host of reasons. And so we met internally and took our time to sort of do a really thorough look at how educators first become certified in Connecticut. And I want to lean on my colleagues who are on the call here, Julianne Frost and Kaylin Ricciardi from the certification side of the house, of the Talent House, and also Lauren Tafredi from the EPP Ed Prep program side of the house. I had the pleasure of working with the three of them and with the analysts around data to sort of pull this thing together. So I'm going to give you a high level overview. Hopefully I can do this in a few minutes. It's only 11 slides, so I'll try to go through it reasonably quickly. They are the experts on the program pathways, and I'll be able to speak about the data side of things as well. So there are 5 main ways in which folks, individuals become certified to educate in Connecticut. The most commonly understood one is the Connecticut Educator Preparation Program pathway, where individuals complete an EPP. Recently as in April 2022, it's more than 3 years ago now, we started the Enhanced Reciprocity Program. But prior to the Enhanced Reciprocity, we had and we continue to have the National Association of State Directors of Teacher Education and Certification, in short, sometimes you may have heard referred to as NASDAQ, interstate agreement that allows for this sort of reciprocity. And there is a program pathway, and then there's an experience pathway. So those are also processed through the certification office. And the last one is a review of transcript experience for educators, primarily in our private schools in Connecticut, for them to enter the teaching workforce in Connecticut. So I'm going to review these 5 pathways very briefly and then show you some high-level numbers that'll give you a sense of what have been the trends in educators first becoming certified in Connecticut. So as you all know, EPPs are approved by the state board, and we have the list of EPPs on our website. Majority of them are considered traditional EPPs, but we also have alternate programs to suit the diverse needs of our students that provide flexibility when it comes to career focus, schedule, and budget. The Enhanced Reciprocity, as I mentioned, was started in April 2022 with 13 states, districts, territories, and since then has been expanded to include 10 additional jurisdictions as of March 2024. So I've listed the list of states and jurisdictions that Enhanced Reciprocity currently allows for. Then we have the 2 NASDAQ options. And under this interstate agreement, Connecticut may accept successful completion of a state-approved EPP from another state, or we can also accept a minimum of 30 months of successful full-time experience under another state's certificate that is appropriate to the subject area being requested in Connecticut. And these all require extensive verification as well as recommendation from the EPP. Lastly, I mentioned we have the transcript experience pathway, and this is primarily educators in approved private or non-public schools in Connecticut can apply for certification based on their experience, and they must submit undergraduate transcript and graduate transcript and a professional experience, the ED 126 form that's signed by the superintendent, executive director, or administrator verifying that experience. So that is another sort of pathway. So those are the sort of 5 broad pathways available. So when trying to look at this, to even prepare the data, to try to summarize this, to get a sense of like where folks are coming from, we had to make some sort of business rules, if you will, because we wanted to count individuals once and not count them multiple times, because it very quickly gets confusing and harder to interpret. So the first thing we did was that we know that people can come through multiple pathways. So to limit the records to 1 per educator identification number, 1 record per person, essentially, we chose the record that matched their earliest certification endorsement. So what was the first endorsement, and how did that endorsement, which pathway did that endorsement come into the state? That was what we were sort of looking for. So now, and I'm going to pause on this slide. So we'll walk through this slide and we'll take our time with it. So this is presenting data going back to 2016-17. And it's presenting data from 2016-17 all the way through to 2023-24. And what this is showing is the number and percentage of individuals who were certified annually by the pathway of that first endorsement. So this does not mean the year in which they completed the EPP. This means when did they actually get certified, the year in which they got their first endorsement, and what pathway did that fall in. Okay, hope that helps. So essentially, when you look at these numbers, this is put, you see the counts. The 5 pathways are listed underneath, with EPP being the biggest chunk that you see in that bluish teal, I don't know, teal color maybe. The green color represents the NASDAQ program, and notice that the enhanced reciprocity, which is orange, doesn't come in till the 21-22 school year, because that was the first year in which we started issuing endorsements. And again, this is how the person's first endorsement was received. Please remember that. The other sort of sparkling blue, I don't know, that other blue is the NASDAQ experience numbers, and those are smaller than the NASDAQ program numbers. And lastly, the top one, which I would say is purple, is the transcript experience numbers. And this is listed on a you see the numbers, but it's also been normalized to 100%. So you kind of see, like, that in these early years, you see like the EPPs were over 50%, and in the 3 most recent years, the EPP, the individuals completing EPP and getting certified, it's a little less than 50%. You notice that the enhanced reciprocity is really coming on strong after that initial year. And as the enhanced reciprocity has increased, you notice that the NASDAQ program numbers have reduced. The NASDAQ experience numbers have also reduced as enhanced reciprocity has come in. The transcript experience numbers have reduced a little bit in the 2 most recent years, but still over 300 even in those 2 most recent years of the data. So essentially, you can see the total numbers are on the bottom. So each year, 2,600, 3,000, in the slightly lower in those pandemic affected years, perhaps, but then back up to about 3,000. So roughly 3,000 annually are getting certified for their first endorsement, and close to half are coming in through EPP, but then another good chunk coming in through enhanced reciprocity. So this is, again, just the number of individuals certified based on their first endorsement. It doesn't say anything about whether they're working or not, so which comes in the subsequent slides. So any questions on this before I go further?
Don't see any raised hands at this
Yep,
time.
I'm not seeing it either. No, thank you. All right. So again, I've made most of these observations already, that the number of individuals certified varies a little bit from year to year. NASDAQ numbers may vary based on migration patterns, while Connecticut EPP numbers may vary based on personal choice, program capacity, program completion, because they don't get the certification unless they complete. And the pandemic obviously had some impact in EPP enrollment as well. The percentage who completed an EPP has declined in recent years to below 50%. I made that observation. And the average number of individuals certified annually based on certification in another state. And this includes either NASDAQ or enhanced reciprocity. When I combine that, what we see is that number, that average, has increased by 1/3 from 5 years prior to enhanced reciprocity to the 3 years after enhanced reciprocity. So essentially, enhanced reciprocity, by implementing the enhanced reciprocity program, we have definitely increased the number of individuals who are coming into the state with a certification from another state. And with the enhanced reciprocity, the NASDAQ pathway has reduced. So essentially, some of the folks who otherwise would have come under NASDAQ are now coming through enhanced reciprocity because it's a lot more streamlined. Plus, I would imagine word is getting out and more people are now realizing how much easier it is to come through the enhanced reciprocity into Connecticut. All right. Next, let's now look at, of those who earned a certificate in that year, how many were subsequently employed in Connecticut public schools? So these numbers, the numbers you see at the bottom, 1980, 2335, these numbers at the bottom, they are a subset of the numbers in this chart. But now we're doing the same percentage, sort of putting it on this normalized 100% stacked bar chart here. So the way to sort of understand this is you now see that, let's say, and let's go to the most recent year, 23-24, there were 1,143 individuals who got their first certification through a Connecticut, first endorsement through a Connecticut EPP, were subsequently employed in the state. So this 1,143 is a subset of this 1,361 two charts prior. So of those who got certified, how many ended up working in the state? And so now you see that the EPP percentages are a little over 50% of those who are employed. So, and of course, there's a slightly smaller chunks, but still sizable, coming from enhanced reciprocity. As we saw in the number certified chart, in the number employed chart, you see that the NASDAQ numbers start to decline as enhanced reciprocity starts to come in. There are also folks who are getting certified through the experience pathway, also ending up in the Connecticut public school workforce. So if I were to turn this into a percentage, this 1143 out of 1361, if I were to turn that as a percentage, that would be this next chart. And this shows essentially of those who came in a particular pathway for the first time, what percentage were ever employed in Connecticut. And for this analysis, we combined the three sort of reciprocity out-of-state pathways. So essentially numbers 2, 3, and 4, the NASDAQ and the enhanced reciprocity, into this orange tab. And then the transcript experience remains as the green as its own, and EPP remains as its own. And if you look across those same years, essentially what you see is that if you come in through an EPP, a Connecticut EPP, more than 80%, almost 85% on average, end up in the Connecticut workforce. And that shouldn't be surprising because, folks who are in a Connecticut EPP end up doing student teaching in our Connecticut public schools, also have internships in Connecticut public schools. Educators are familiar with those individuals. To a lesser extent, the reciprocity folks who come through for the first time through reciprocity show up in the workforce, a lesser rate, and the transcript experience to an even lesser rate. And, while those Connecticut EPPs, that their rates are greater, the reciprocity and the experience rates are lower, and that's influenced by a myriad of factors: family circumstances, cost of living, job openings in the certified area, travel distance. We know that New York and Massachusetts are two of the biggest reciprocity partners, along with Rhode Island, in terms of where those individuals are bringing their basis state, if you will, from where they're coming. But they might get certified in Connecticut, but maybe they don't plan to necessarily teach immediately. They just want to have that certification in their pocket. Perhaps they're already living in Connecticut and they got certified in another state, and they're just sort of getting the Connecticut credential. And they'll go back to work in Connecticut when the time is right. So maybe they're not getting certified at, or not getting employed or working in Connecticut public schools at about the same rate as those who complete a Connecticut EPP. So essentially, hopefully that gives you a big picture sense of where our folks are coming from, which pathway are they entering, and and which pathway are they ending up working in our Connecticut public schools? I know Shannon had her hand raised for a brief second there, but then seems like she lowered her hand. So Shannon, my
Shannon,
piece
do
is
you have a
done, and I can
question?
happy to answer questions.
Sure. Thanks, Ajit.
there-
If you could go back to the last slide real quick. I know you mentioned that there's all kinds of reasons why someone who comes in through the reciprocity or NASDAQ would not actually convert to employment, but it looks like there's been a pretty big drop off just in recent years from the 70s down into the 50s, and wondered if there's any specific reason you might have seen that just in 23, 24, and is there any effort to survey or communicate with those individuals to find out what they actually ended up doing?
So would you be answering that question, or would anyone else
Well,
from
let
SDE?
me just present one thing, and then I'm going to invite Kaylin and Julianne and anyone from the talent side to speak. My only caution of that most recent year, Shannon, would be that the amount of time we have to look forward is only a year. So if those individuals got certified in May of 24, then they have the 24-25 year to show up in the workforce. And maybe they'll show in 25-26. So if we run this data, maybe this year, maybe we'll be back up to 70-ish%. So I would just withhold judge too much sort of reading into this 59% for the reciprocity. I would just want to wait a little bit, because I suspect they might get certified and they might just not be ready to jump into the workforce immediately, and they might just need that little time to get their situation squared away, because they can get certified at any point during the year, but job openings necessarily don't come all year. So I'll say that, and then Kaylin, Julianne, Lauren, you want to add anything there?
So if you guys could go ahead and raise your hand, I'll go ahead and call on you for the purpose of minute taking. Of who would like to add to that from SDE. All right, I believe we have Julianne, go ahead.
The only thing I was going to mention is I think, you see enhanced reciprocity. So the orange now is NASDAQ and enhanced reciprocity. But I think when enhanced reciprocity came about, it was a new thing. And now I think word is getting out that that's an option. And there may be people who are proactively getting a certificate through that pathway, with the idea of, kind of in line with what Ajit was saying, not this year, but I'm getting ready because I just learned it existed and I want to be prepared in the next year or so to move into Connecticut. So I think that could also be a factor.
Thank you. And then Lauren, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I was going to say something similar. I think a little bit the ease of enhanced reciprocity, folks may apply for certification even before they've moved to Connecticut, just in anticipation, in the next couple of years I might be moving there. Let me go ahead and get my certification so that I'm ready. Or, folks who are staying home with kids who are anticipating entering the workforce, in a couple of years. There's not always a direct correlation of when somebody applies for certification indicating that they're immediately looking for a position.
Thank you. And I see Kaylin's hand.
I was going to echo that same sentiment as well, but also, we've definitely heard a lot of feedback from the field that there's been an elimination of positions too, with some cuts, and we do get that feedback from the field as well. But I think if we had the opportunity to perhaps reach out to our districts and have a better idea of their hiring practices, and that would be very useful information.
All right, thank you. Are there any additional questions for Ajit or anyone from SDE on what has been presented thus far? Okay, Ajit, if you want to continue on.
That actually concludes my presentation. So I hope this was helpful to the members. Again, we wanted to just give you a high-level overview. If you have any follow-up questions, we're happy to, after the meeting, you think of something, please feel free to reach out through Karen and she will connect with us. Oh, Kristen?
We had Kristen, go ahead.
And I know there's also another pathway that was recently created because of the Public Act where teachers that might be missing one criteria can submit information to the State Department of Education that kind of like puts together a portfolio for them if they feel like they could be certified, and that goes to the state board. Do we have an idea of how many teachers became certified in that pathway for last year because it was only available for last year?
I'm going to see if anyone from SDE want to answer that question of how many have been put forth to the State Board of Education for approval since Public Act 2441 was enacted. All right, Julianne.
Sorry.
Kaylin may be able to answer better than me, but Kaylin, why don't you take over?
Kaylin, go ahead.
That's okay. Since the Public Act is put in effect, we've done a total of 5 altogether in the last year, and this and last week, including last week's board meeting. So it's been 5 individuals.
And also, can I just add to that, some of the documentation that was provided to the board includes a flow chart on these pathways to certification, as well as the waiver that we're discussing here. I believe the waiver is in green on that documentation that was shared with you on there. I tried to align the colors from Ajit's presentation as much as I could to the flow charts that were provided. And the flow charts talk about traditional preparation, enhanced reciprocity, NASDAQ programming, NASDAQ experience, transcript experience, waiver, and alternative preparation. And within this data for alternative and traditional in that dark blue, it's the numbers in Ajit's report is both of those combined. It's the alternative route as well as the traditional route in that 84% that you see there on the screen right now. We also included retirement in there because there was some question by the board as to what happens if you lose or you allow your certification to lapse. And we did include the waiver because the waiver process is a very new process with only 5 going through to the State Board of Education. Of those 5 that have gone through, have they all been approved, or were there more than 5 and some were not approved by the State Board of Education? Kaylin or Lauren or Julianne? Julianne, go ahead. Thank you.
There were 5 that made it as far as being presented to meeting the criteria enough to move in front of the state board, and those 5 were approved. There were others that were requested, but they didn't meet the criteria to move that far.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a general knowledge of how many didn't meet the criteria?
Well, we still have some that are in process too. So,
Okay.
5 met the criteria to go up in front of the board, while others, may be serving under some type of a temporary authorization at this time. And perhaps like throughout the work of this year, they may be eligible to go up further as well. But as far as requests, in addition to what's gone through and been approved, we have about 6 or 7 more right now that are in process of consideration.
Okay. And it's my understanding that the transcript experience pathway is set for repeal as of July 1st, 2026. So that purple chunk that we see in the graph there may not exist potentially.
Correct, which is separate from the waiver process. So when we're thinking about transcript experience, we're looking at what's currently in the certification regulations. And that would be accepting 20 months of successful service in an approved non-public school. In addition to that, that also encompasses our educators that are coming in internationally. So because they don't belong to a state and we don't have an agreement with another country, but we can accept some type of a program that they did. So part of that pathway, as well as the approved non-public school pathway, is that we're reviewing their transcripts for coursework according to Connecticut regulatory standards, as well as testing.
And the Public Act 2441 waiver that went into effect, I believe, this past year, that was meant to replace the transcript experience pathway because it's set for sunsetting. Is that my understanding?
For me personally, I don't really know if they're directly related, because, you know, this other waiver pathway that we're talking about when we're looking, I mean, they could be related. It's a combination of education and experience. We might have an individual who did a program and didn't meet certain criteria, or did a program in another state, but their state laws don't allow for a recommendation. So the waiver and the transcript evaluation, while they could be similar in how they're written, they are two separate entities at this time, because the transcript evaluation piece we can handle in-house within the Bureau of Certification. Our analysts can evaluate for such issuance. However, the waiver process goes beyond what we have in statute or regulation for board consideration for approval.
Thank you. I see a couple hands up from the board, so I'll start with Dr. Good. Rebecca, go ahead.
You're on mute.
Where'd she?
Just a point of information. When Madam Chair, when you're referring to one of the many documents that were shared on Friday, can you please share screen so we can all see what you are referring to?
Sure. Karen, could you pull up the certification flow chart that was shared with the board?
Was it 45 hours? 5 hours? Yeah. All we need is a copy of your certificate. You can upload that right here.
Julianne, could you mute? Thank you. Thank you. For those that are waiting, it was labeled certification flow chart in the materials packet that Karen had sent out to the board. And Julianne, while we're waiting for that to come up, go ahead.
I was just going to mention when you were asking about was the new waiver or pathway supposed to be a replacement of that? Back before we had the board, when we had a committee talking about creating this board, the idea of removing the 2 years plus transcript eval was put forward that was going to be removed. And I, during those meetings, said this is a concern to me because this is an important pathway for our foreign credentialed people, for people coming from non-public schools and so forth. And during the conversations, nothing was ever put in writing, but it was like, oh, no, we're going to have this new waiver pathway and that's going to meet that same criteria. But again, as Kaylin mentioned, it doesn't really, it's not the same. I mean, it's similar, but it's not the same. Like the transcript eval says you need 20 months in the same district, you know, it's more specific and we rely back on the regulations, whereas the waiver hasn't had a specific guidance as far as, well, how much experience do you need and what will the transcript review entail? So that's where the slight variation is.
Thank you. Kristen, go ahead.
Yeah, more of just a comment then, especially like seeing the numbers that Ajit presented for the transcript experience pathway. I mean, that's hundreds of candidates that if that pathway were allowed to expire, yeah, they could all apply through the Public Act waiver, the waiver that was created, but that's also a huge amount of work because every one of those needs to have a portfolio that gets approved, that goes to the board, and the State Board of Ed really can't be spending, you know, their entire time doing 300 waivers. So I think as a board, we need to look at that transcript experience pathway and make sure that something still exists for international teachers and those coming from non-public schools, or ones that we don't have any sort of NASDAQ or enhanced reciprocity agreement with. I guess if I had to ask a question, it would be that if you had someone who was teaching, let's say, physics in college, let's say I was teaching undergraduate physics, like Physics 151 at UConn, and I go through a teacher prep program, would I still would I be a person that could go through this transcript experience pathway if my experience was teaching at a university?
In the example that you just
Um,
gave, though, you said if they went through a teacher prep program. Do you mean if they didn't go through one, or?
I did.
Okay, then I will let Juliana Killen answer. So just to clarify.
Julianne, go ahead. Thank you.
So we accept 2 years of teaching at the same accredited IHE in the same way that we would a public school. So if whether you were teaching freshman math for 2 years at UConn or Western or wherever, or whether you were teaching 2 years of high school math, the feeling is, you're teaching math to that year. So yes, you would be able to use that experience. That's the 2 years plus that we may be sunsetted.
All right, thank you. Ajit, I think in terms of data in your presentation, you're probably all set if you have to go to your next meeting. And I think the other questions might be able to be answered by Lauren, Kaylin, and Julianne. I don't want to hold you up from your next meeting. I appreciate your efforts in presenting that information to us, to the board.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right. So would the board like us to scroll through each one of these and present any questions, or would we like to move to the ECE? Is there a specific question on one of the items on the flow chart? So maybe if we go to the one that we were talking about, the transcript experience, the purple one, Karen, if you could scroll up to the purple one. The traditional, alternative, keep scrolling down until we get to the purple one. Hope we're not giving anybody vertigo, or apologies if we are. All right, Rebecca, go ahead.
I would move that we don't go through line by line of these, since we just received them, and give board members an opportunity to review them and then come back with questions, because we do have a number of other items.
Sure, we can add it to the October agenda to present any questions on the flow chart to SDE. Do I have a motion for that at this time?
So moved.
All right. We have a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand with the raise your hand button, please.
I did have a comment or a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Before we vote, then go ahead and do that. Sorry, Shannon, I didn't see your hand there.
It's just more an observation and a request for the future. It's just if we can get these materials any further in advance, because I feel like we're missing the chance to review the work ahead of time and get into the conversation, and then we have to punt it a whole nother month to get to it. And so not getting it on the Friday before these meetings, and it's 10 plus attachments, it's just not realistic that people can do all the pre-reading. If we can get like at least
Sure.
a few days, that would be.
I believe
appreciate-
our bylaws say that things should be in by 10 business days prior to board meetings and then forwarded. But I think that they have to be forwarded no less than 24 business hours prior to the board meeting is my understanding, but I have to go back and look at the bylaws for sure. I can have Karen circle back as to when folks should be submitting and then when we are able to send out to the board, just to kind of ensure expectations on that. I know that with the ad hoc, they had voted to have things a minimum of 5, or they had not voted, but made the request to have their materials in approximately 5 days before their next ad hoc meeting. So that can definitely be something that I can have Karen follow up on.
Thank you.
All right, so let's go back to the motion at hand to put this on our October agenda for review and questions. All those in favor, please click the raise your hand button at this time. So virtual is supposed to be a roll, so I'll just call off the names as I see them with the raised hand for you, Karen. So we have Anne in favor, Shannon in favor, Rebecca in favor, Kristen in favor, Jenny Graves in favor, Sarah, Margaret. And going over to next, Cynthia Ritchie and Tiffany. And I will vote in favor as well. Any opposed?
My hand is
Go ahead.
disabled, Jen. I'm in
Oh,
favor.
sorry, Elsa as well. Thank you. And Patrice, it looks like. Patrice, are you in favor or are you opposed? Right now it's anyone who is opposed, so please unselect your raised hand button, and anyone who is opposed. Thank you. Patrice, are you opposed then? I just want to make sure that it's the correct button being selected for the correct thing. I think it might have been for the vote for, but I'm not positive. We'll let her chime in afterwards. Either way, the motion carries, and we will add that to our October agenda. So review with multiple pathways flowchart. All right, next on our agenda, Karen, you can go ahead and close that. Next on our agenda is Public Act 2441. I will be handing over the reins of chair to Dr. Ritchie for discussion of this, or as I present this, and then any discussion. I'll have Karen pull it up on the screen. Vice Chair, am I able to go ahead and present at this time?
Yes, you may go forward and present, please. Karen,
Great.
is it possible to stretch it just a little bit bigger? I know everyone also has it in their email, but thank you.
And then just as a reminder, type into the chat speaking for or against or question, and Dr. Ritchie will call people based on what's listed in the chat.
And
we'll try to-
questions will go first.
Correct, as they
Okay.
pop up. So the purpose of this proposal is to transfer authority for the approval of educator certification to the State Board, from the State Board of Education to the Connecticut Education Preparation Certification Board. That's that newer waiver that we just heard about, with the 5 that have gone through and others that are in process. I thought that this would be a good idea. We wouldn't be certifying necessarily, but we would be providing the approval. It would allow us to kind of see what the concerns are, where there are lacking opportunities, and then maybe find ways in which from that data support EPPs in the work as well as candidates in the work to certification. I think that this would help us gain a deeper lens into some of the pitfalls that are actually keeping people out of the education workforce via certification. Again, we would not be issuing the certification, we would just be approving it, and then the issuance would obviously still come from SBE, SDE. If we slide down to the actual language, this comes from Public Act 2441. Keep going down. Right there. So Section 6 of the Public Act, and the only things that would really change in the beginning is just a rollout of 2026 to allow that transfer. And then you can see the crossouts and then the new language within there. I've also added in a Section C and a Section D. The Connecticut Educator Preparation Certification Board, in coordination with the State Department of Education, shall establish protocols and guidance for the process of initial certification waiver request under that Public Act 2441 section, just in case we got rid of the other one that is set for sunsetting, maybe pulling in some of those ideas or those processes into this for that protocol process. And then D, any member of the Connecticut Educator Preparation Certification Board who has direct personal, professional, or financial interests in an education preparation program or applicant under consideration shall recuse themselves from any discussion or vote on such matter. This just aligns with the state statutes on recusement to ensure that, you know, we are voting on it in an appropriate and transparent way for the candidates and the public.
Okay. All right, thank you for presenting. At this time, I'm going to open it up for questions. I have some if no one else is raising their hand. So just thinking this through, we would be speaking about people who are looking to get certified and helping to guide decisions within the board, correct?
Helping to guide decisions. We would be looking at those portfolios that are currently going to SBE, like the 5 that have already been. Instead of it going to SBE, it would come to us, and we would be reviewing those portfolios and voting to approve them or not to approve them for certification. But it would also give us a deeper lens into the possible reasons in which people are having difficulty becoming certified, which might help us in our work moving forward as well.
Is there a criteria that you're thinking of around this?
So that would be that section C in building protocol and in coordination, protocol and guidelines in coordination with the Department of Education. So the board would work with them to come up with a process and protocol to help with that, streamline the process and make it, as efficient as possible.
Okay, thank you. I see other hands have raised. Cynthia?
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I was under the impression that the certification board had a statutory responsibility to develop alternative assessment. If we take that into consideration, and if those changes are made, that would reinforce perhaps a waiver not being needed. So, which would then reinforce alternative assessment, our work of the board carrying out its statutory charge by developing those alternative assessments most likely would not need a waiver approval, or am I totally off by that?
My understanding is that it's 2 separate waiver systems. We're looking and pondering additional waivers. And if you kind of look in that pathways to certification, there's a last page with lots of different certification testing waivers on there. This wouldn't be a certification testing waiver, which is what we've been pondering. This would be taking a look at an entire portfolio of those kind of moving forward, if that makes sense. It's 2 different waivers. It's Public Act 2441 Section 6 is a different waiver than the waivers that currently exist and the waivers that we're looking at.
Okay.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Yes, I can't remember if I'm supposed to put something in the chat, but in speaking against this, one, I do not think that us as a certification board should take on any additional bureaucratic responsibilities until we have actually completed our statutory obligation in terms of modernizing and aligning the whole educator preparation and certification system. So that's one reason why I don't think we should take this on. 2, I do not think this would be in the candidate's best interest right now, because we would just be adding another layer of bureaucracy, which is us, right? They now have to present their waiver to SDE, then it goes to the board, and now we would be adding us in, which actually could delay the process for that candidate to receive a waiver. And I'm just thinking about people who have been through the waiver process for like 10, 12 months, and now we could be adding to that. And then 3, I think that the way this is presented, it's providing that we as a cert board would be giving SDE employees, like, here's how to do your job in terms of this, versus like having them kind of present to us. And so for those 3 reasons, we haven't finished what we originally need to do. We do not want to get in the way, an additional bureaucratic step for candidates. And I would want much more information from SDE employees on their thoughts on this. I would not recommend that we move forward with this at this time.
Dr. Ritchie, can I reply?
Yes.
Thank you. So in terms of finishing, that's why I put the date of July 1st, 2026 as the time, because that's when our last statutory obligation is due. We will still have, additional work that we are doing, reevaluating each year, that kind of thing, data. But our last statutory obligation is listed for July 1st, 2026, which is why I put that date there. And then how long, I would ask Dr. Ritchie to ask SDE, how long are the current waivers in their system before SBE has them? That would be one question. And two, this wouldn't add an additional layer. This would actually remove SBE from doing it. We would be taking over the responsibility that SBE currently has of reviewing it. Once we've reviewed it, then an issuance of certification would happen, is the way it's written.
Thank you. So Julianne is next, and I'll ask Julianne, can you please answer the question, how long are waivers in the system typically?
Yes, so I may have to have Kaylin's been handling most of those, so she probably has it better. Some of them have been very quick. Others have taken longer. It really depends on the circumstances and how much additional supporting information that we need. So it really, there's a large range. Hopefully she can chime in, but I also wanted to mention that the idea that if we work on different assessments that we wouldn't need a waiver, and just be aware that there are cases where assessments are not what's standing in the way. One of the people, for example, who went through, fully completed a program and they couldn't be recommended because their program required them to apply and get a job in another state. Had nothing to do with testing. They'd passed testing. So testing isn't the only problem that people run into. Sometimes it has to do with other circumstances.
Thank you. I'm going to add a technical question if I may. Could we as a CERT board talk about people's personal information publicly with transparency, or isn't that confidential? Like people's files?
When we put up the board report, we do have to include some information. Most of the information in the CECS, which is our Connecticut Educator Certification System, is FOIable, with the exception of date of birth, social security number, any really personal identifying information. However, when we write the board report for presentation, we do have to include some very specific information about the educator regarding their pathway or the situation that they're in, to give the board as much information as possible to be able to make an informed decision.
Thank you. Kristen?
Yeah, I think this is a really thoughtful proposal because we had actually brought this up in the ad hoc for alternate minimum content knowledge assessment. And we had asked, well, could all these people just go through the waiver? And it was found that the waiver really is a much more in-depth process than just looking at content knowledge. So it's looking at transcripts, it's looking at experience, it's got the portfolio. And to go through the misunderstanding, this doesn't add a layer, it replaces SBE, which has such a broad range of topics that they have to cover as part of their role, and makes the board that's dealing with their certification the actual Connecticut Education Preparation and Certification Board. So it's replacing SBE, this big general board, with our board. And I think the knowledge is actually really important for our board to have, because we've kept asking questions back and forth about, how long are the waivers taking, how many people are in there, because it's something that we should know as the certification board. And as to the comment that, we'd be telling the State Department of Education what to do, actually, one of the State Department of Education employees said, well, we don't have any protocol and guidance that we were given when it was created last year. So having that discussion where we can establish some protocols and work collaboratively would actually be really good to know. So especially when we're hearing from candidates and we're helping them through, we can say, well, this waiver program might be a good choice for you, and here are some of the guidelines that you can work toward. Because right now, I can't point to anyone and say, you know, oh, you need these sorts of things. I'd like to at least be able to say to, you know, some of our teachers who are DSAP'd and working right now, like, hey, if you get this together and bring it to the State Board of Ed, there's a way for you.
Thank you. Cynthia? Cynthia, I don't know if you're there, but you're up to speak. Okay, we're going to move to Rebecca Good and we'll wait for her to come back.
She did need to step away. I just want to name, if we do what we are originally asked to do, which would make a more comprehensive and streamlined and broader entrance into the profession, certification pathways, we wouldn't need to create, I feel like we're creating this waiver system, just working within the confines of what we currently have. And so, like, why do we need that? If this is similar to what Cynthia was saying, why are we going in that direction when we really need to actually be focusing this conversation in our time right now on the steps that come before this, like the actual pathways? The waiver is the extra. Like, when all our pathways don't work, we go for the waiver. But right now, we have not done our job in defining what the pathways are going to be. So I would like to focus on that before we do this.
Thank you. Kaylin?
Hi, yes, Rebecca, I would echo that. You know, the regs that are about to sunset 7/1/26 that speak specifically about a combination of what we currently have regs in place, where we're looking at the 20 months of successful service to waive the recommendation, and then we do a transcript review. As part of the work to redo the regs, we would be looking specifically at that. Like, what will those requirements be? Will we maintain the 20 months? Will we, you know, maintain the current coursework that's required of those educators to be issued a certificate? That is something that the CSDE, our Talent Office Bureau, can handle in-house, and we wouldn't have to go a different waiver pathway. It's just up for sunset for reconsideration, but there still should be something in place. Like, speaking to Kristen's point, it's like, we don't want to leave out our international teachers. We don't want to leave out our private school teachers. That is exactly right. Something like a waiver is going to be completely separate from that. And you're right. So the way the legislation is written, it is kind of open. So it's unclear exactly what is the proper combination of education and experience. You know, and Kristen, you're right. The State Board of Ed does have a huge purview for what they're doing. The Ed Prep and Cert Board may be just the perfect entity to determine what that combination of education and of experience is. And to Rebecca's point, for everyone else that doesn't meet the different pathways that we already have in place. And someone had asked a question previously about, you know, how long is it taking? I would say on average about 4 to 5 months. And that's just because, you know, once someone comes to us and is, you know, requesting a waiver, the first thing we need to make sure is that they're under some type of a temporary authorization. We want to make sure they're at least a DSAP because they, you know, get higher pay, they, you know, are eligible for benefits, something to cover it. And then the Bureau itself, we have to go on a fact-finding mission. We might need to be working directly with their EPP, working directly with their employing district, finding out a different combination of documentation that will prove, you know, this educator's experience and education to be up for consideration for board approval. So it does take a little bit of time, especially, you know, getting a spot on the agenda, having the board reports go through. It is somewhat of a timely process, but that's why we need to ensure that the educator is serving under something temporary to cover them while this is all going on. And if you have any additional questions about it, please let me know, but I hope I addressed the questions that came up to date.
Thank you. I've been reminded of the time, and I see we have a handful of people who would like to comment. So those that have already raised their hands, we're going to go through you quickly, and then we're going to table this topic to add it to the next meeting because there seems like there's a lot of conversation around it, which is great. So next, I'm going to call on Shannon.
I think there might be a motion in the chat. I don't know if Elsa.
Yes, sorry.
Okay.
Okay, I would like to motion to close this discussion and bring it back to our organization. Because I know they'll definitely have some input that can help lead the decision. And I'm definitely for if I can take anything from the Department of Ed, and if it's within our realm of what we have to do, it's worth looking at and discussing further. So can I motion to close the discussion and maybe vote at the next meeting?
Okay, can I have a second for that, please?
I'll second,
Kristen
and then I have a
DeSega, so
comment.
moved.
Okay, Shannon, you may comment.
So I was just similarly, I think it's almost, I appreciate the desire to have a line of sight into the waivers and what they've consisted of. So it'd be helpful to get a summary of what waivers have already come in and like what are the circumstances, if we could just have that in one consolidated summary, because I think if we're doing our job right, to some of the other points that have been made, we would potentially remove the need for waivers at all. And if there still was a place, a little sliver of population that needed waivers, then we could come back to this. But it feels like this is a little bit cart before horse because we haven't yet done what we need to do. And we can't do what we need to do without knowing what the circumstances have been of waiver applicants up to this point.
Correct. I'm going to add a bit to that. Could we also please have a summary of waivers that were denied and the circumstances around that for continued discussion? Okay, so we have a motion to close the discussion on this topic. And I think we're ready to vote for that motion. How many are in favor of closing this discussion to move it to the next meeting? Okay, so I see a couple hands up, couple in the chat. Karen, are you getting all these numbers? We're 11, 12. I have to scroll a little bit. Patricia's 13. Elsa, I got you. Thank you. Okay, I think the motion passes. So we will close this discussion. Thank you very much, Chair, for bringing this forward. It brought a lot of energy for discussion, and we will continue the conversation around this during the next meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ritchie. So our next item is our new waiver proposals. So I believe we have 3 new waiver proposals. You had received the June-August proposal in an earlier email, which had their red updates from the June meeting and then the blue questions that were presented in the August meeting. Rebecca encapsulated that in a newer version with some language change that she'd like the board to consider. And I believe Kristen brought forward 2 proposals as well. So why don't we go ahead and we'll begin with just voting on whether or not we want to use Rebecca's old language with our questions in it or the new language that she's proposed for us to continue work on. And then we will go into the presentations. Actually, no, this is the presentation. So there's a presentation of waivers. So Rebecca, if you want to go ahead and speak to your updated language on the newer version of the waiver, and then we will go from there.
Yes, the newer one, it says minimum content knowledge alternative approaches. I took the word waiver out because we're actually not waiving content knowledge. We're like, candidates are demonstrating content knowledge in alternative ways and being then approved by their EPP or assessed by their EPP, or in the current version, assessed by their district. So that's an attestation, forget the word, right? Attestation. Which is not waiving information. And so I did change that language in the updated version to reflect that. So.
Okay, thank you. So
okay. Should I make a motion to, any questions about that, or should we?
Hold on a quick second. I have Karen, I think you have the wrong one up. We need the one that says minimum content knowledge alternative approach up right now. It has like a yellow highlight at the top. No, I don't think it's that one. I want to close that one.
But The title of the document is Minimum Content Knowledge Alternative Approach. Yes.
Okay. All right, so if everyone wants to take a look at that, does anyone have any questions specifically for Rebecca? Is there anything else you want to add to your presentation, Rebecca?
You said we're just deciding between if we'll move forward discussing it through this lens or through the other, what's the other document titled in the folder?
It was, I believe it said June, August waiver, and it was sent earlier on as a separate email to the board.
So I move that we move forward with this version that everyone sees on the screen.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion? I see a raised hand for Cynthia, Deputy Commissioner.
I think that's there from before, Jen.
She was called
Okay.
away, so she can't put her hand down.
Okay, so we'll go to if you're able to type the questions for now. Kristen, go ahead.
So I like in this new one that you're submitting that under the district attestation that you removed the professional development, because I know one of the questions that came up before was like, who's going to pay for it and like when would that occur? I guess the question that I have is for EPP attestation. So what are the steps? Because it says upon the completion of EPP approved steps, what would the EPP be requiring the candidate to do?
That's a great question, and I'd love to talk about it if we move forward with the motion to disregard
Correct.
the other one and move forward with this. So I think we need to, if the questions or discussions are about that, then, and we're going to just focus in on this version, then let's definitely come back to that question.
Okay, so between the two versions, the old one, which was sent earlier on a couple weeks ago, and this one, we have a motion to accept this one as the working current to replace the previous working model. So with that in mind, we have a second. Is there any discussion about replacing the first versus the second one, Sarah?
Yeah, so in our file for today, there are two documents from Kristen. Are those the ones? I don't see the document that we're replacing this current one with. What is that document called?
We had sent it out on, let's see.
I just want to make sure that I'm looking at the two documents. I have the one, the minimum content knowledge alternative approaches.
Karen, can you pull the other one up on the screen so everybody can see it, since it was not in the folder on Friday?
Okay, if it wasn't there, then I'm
Yeah.
That you're not missing it. You're not missing it. Like it was not in that folder. You're okay.
I believe it was sent to the board for review on August 21st. It is June and August notes for minimum content knowledge. I will download it and forward it at this time again. I'll forward it to Karen for her to pull up.
Madam Chair, it's Cynthia. May I ask Rebecca a question while we're waiting?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. Rebecca, I noticed that the professional development hours were removed this time. Could you help me think about your thinking on that?
For the, I don't think that we should get into the weeds of what all of those hours are as a CERT board. I think just as the top part that says like EPPs that will participate will determine that, I think districts should determine that. This is a small percentage of candidates, and I think that a district would then determine what that may be. That was my thinking.
I
And
have
the
sent it
price,
to
the price
Karen.
structure.
I have sent it to Karen, and usually it takes a moment or two to come through. But you should also have access to it on your 21st document. August 21st. Are there any other changes, Rebecca, that from the old one to the new one that you'd be able to express while we're waiting for that to come up?
No, but I can answer questions.
Okay. All right, Julianne, go ahead.
The option where it becomes the district attestation, so the person completed a program, the EPP is not going to recommend them, and then the district is going to say, no, we think you have enough content. So in the end, the district is saying this person has the content. What is the basis of their certification? Does this mean that, is this one of the waiver situations, or are you saying the waiver, you're going to tell the EPP that the district's going to tell the EPP the content's been met? I mean, because if the district is attesting to the content area major, who's recommending? What's the pathway that they're actually going to get certified? That wasn't clear to me.
Like the EPP, completion of the EPP, or actually, Anne, you just were nodding. What was your question? I want to hear your question before I answer.
I think I have the same question as Julianne,
Oh.
because.
Anne, I'm going to ask you to hold just a second, just a quick second, please. Are you able to answer Julianne's, or would you like me to move on and see if there's additions to Julianne's?
Actually, I move that this topic on waivers be considered informally. Was there a second?
I'll second.
Well,
that.
right now we're just having discussion on it. So in its right,
But
it is informal.
I know, but I'm moving to have the discussion be considered informally under Robert's rules so that we can have like just an open collaboratory discussion. We don't have to do questioning through the chair. We can just talk.
Erin, can you, as our Robert's rules person, speak to that?
Yes, that's unfortunately not an option. When you're conducting board business, it is formal. So you have to adhere to the rules of Robert's Rules of Order. So if you're
right, Robert's Rules of Order, I can make a motion for the committee of the whole, or I can make a motion to move to a specific question or topic to be considered informally. That is Robert's Rules.
I can check that, but according to the bylaws, things that are discussed at a board meeting are formal because they're becoming part of a record of the board.
Right. It allows, by moving to consider informally, it allows us to have free and unrestricted debate within the confines of Robert's rules.
So do you have the section? Do you have the section so I can verify that? What's the section?
I don't have the section memorized.
Yeah, because I am not familiar with that particular section. Would be helpful. I mean, I can do the research, but I'm not familiar with that particular section.
While Karen does that research to move the work forward, are you able to answer Julianne's, or would you like to pause and you take Anne's question?
I'll wait.
Here we are. I have the former version available.
Thank you. Of the original version there. And while Karen is looking that up, we will continue in order of those with raised hands at this time. So Sarah, if you can go ahead, I see your hand is raised. Question for Rebecca.
Yes, I wanted to ask about, let me get it up so I can see it. With regard to the EPP attestation, and I think this question was asked, but then I might have asked for the other version and we didn't get there. Will there be like specific guidelines for that phrase, minimum content knowledge defined by the participating EPP? Because I'm wondering if every EPP could have a different way of demonstrating minimum content knowledge, or if it would be the same across all EPPs. I think it needs a little more specificity.
Okay, and then next I believe is Anne. Go ahead.
Well, on that point, I actually think it shouldn't have specificity because, again, the EPPs know the candidates well and know the areas of deficiencies usually and can appropriately respond based on the candidate. But more to the initial concern I have with the district attesting to the content knowledge, then the question becomes, as Julianne brought up, who brings the certification ruling to the licensure board. For example, if I have a candidate whom I've done pretty much all of their pedagogical work and oversight in their clinical work, but they've not yet proven their content knowledge to me, if they've proven it to the district, is it then the district's responsibility to say this candidate is ready, or does it come back to the EPP? I still feel strongly that our initial, under the Public Act 2441, it says explicitly to ensure that the educator preparation programs are accountable for both the quality training experiences and outcomes for candidates. That appears to me that it puts that responsibility for accountability for the candidate in the hands of the EPPs. And I think that's important to recognize that is in the original House bill that we were formed from.
All right, thank you. So was there a question specifically to Rebecca about that, or more of a statement speaking in favor?
There's an inherent question in there that, you know, should we have, who's responsible? Yeah.
Okay. Rebecca, would you like to answer that?
I agree with Anne that it should be EPP responsibility, and this version, not the version we're all looking at right now, the additional version that I had proposed, I would be open to removing the district section if the board was.
Thank you. Jenny Graves?
Yes. For option one, I too had some wonderings about how EPPs would define the minimum content knowledge, but more so, I was curious of what the additional requirements would be. Would that be universal? Would that be per EPP? Because I have some concerns about that not being equitable.
Thank you. Rebecca, would you like to reply?
I think we have to, maybe this is a philosophical question for us as a board. How much oversight, additional oversight beyond our approval processes for our EPPs are we wanting to put on this particular element of what we would be asking an EPP to do? To me, I actually, an EPP that participates, they get to decide. Now, if we trust our EPPs that have been approved in our state, then we should be able to say, those are approved EPPs in the state of Connecticut. I trust them, they will decide for this very small amount of candidates. If we do not trust them, then I think that's a much larger conversation we should have as a board.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm gonna go ahead and close discussion after Kristen, and we're gonna move to the next one because we have to move it to a vote because then we still have two additional ones, and we still have the birth to third grade to look at and vote on. So I want to be mindful of time and allow voice at each one. So I'm going to go ahead, Kristen, and then we're going to move it to a vote.
Yeah, I was actually just going to suggest that because we're choosing between like which of Rebecca's we want to use to look at right now, and that my presentation will come after, that we just move to a vote on which of the two that we'd like her to use, because they had the one with the blue text is more of like our discussions and notes, and the one that she had with the fewer professional development hours is the newer thoughts.
All right, so was that a motion? Oh, well, we're closing discussion and we're voting. So the vote is to accept the newer waiver over the older waiver for us to continue work on. All those in favor? We'll do a roll really quickly, Karen.
Jennifer Rodriguez.
Yes,
We're gonna do in favor, correct? In favor?
Yes, in favor. Yes.
Cynthia Ritchie.
No.
Kristen Basiaga.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
We're voting at this time. We're voting on the new one versus the old one. So are you voting in
I just
favor of the
wanted to-
new version?
I'm in favor of voting for the new version as one that we are continuing work on, but not adopting as a board. Thank you.
Correct. I think that was the motion. If I wasn't clear, the motion was to pick between the two waivers that the board would continue to work on. My apologies if that was not clear. So that was a yes, Kristen? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sarah Laura Fitzsimons.
No.
Elsa Batista. Yes.
Yes.
Rebecca Good.
Yes.
Margaret Gustafson.
Yes.
Anne Deschelle.
Yes.
Tiffany Cowett.
Yes.
Shannon Merriman.
Yes. Yes.
And I believe Deputy Commissioner is still away. Deputy Commissioner, are you there? Okay. All right. You have, as of now,
I'm sorry, I didn't vote.
I didn't vote either.
I'm sorry, who did I miss, please?
I think
Patrice
Jennifer
Shannon
Graves?
and Patrice. No, Shannon and Patrice.
Shannon, you
And
did not?
And
sorry.
Catherine,
Okay,
And
Dr.
Catherine.
Rowe. Catherine Rowe?
Catherine Rowe 4, yes.
Shannon Marmot?
I already voted. I said
You
yes.
voted yes. That's what I thought.
And
All
then
right.
Patrice, I think, was the last one. Was Patrice in there?
Jenny Graves
Yes.
didn't vote.
And Jenny Graves didn't vote.
I
Jennifer
am a
Graves?
yes. I am a yes.
And Patrice McCarthy.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So
So Rebecca's is one of the waivers that we will consider. The motion passes, correct?
yes.
All right, to consider the first one. Now we will move into the next one. Kristen, which one would you like to begin with? Because I believe you submitted 2 to Karen for review.
So I was thinking a lot about the waivers, and I know there was a lot of energy between both the EPP waiver and district waiver. So the problem was I couldn't vote for either of them the way that they currently stand. On the EPP waiver side, I have a lot of very serious concerns about accountability, about having this be cost-free to students, about having third-party verification of, finding out whether these candidates do in fact have content knowledge. And I was worried about the changes from school to school to school, where each EPP could have completely different criteria and having no knowledge as to what that was. So in the email that you received earlier on Friday, you should have got a document that was titled, I want to say it was called EPP Waiver September 2025, something along those lines. In the EPP waiver, I was listening to people's conversations about how we should, the EPPs knows what's useful for their program. They'll be able to choose a a content knowledge assessment that makes sense for their particular program. So I think it makes sense if an EPP would like to waive the current minimum content knowledge assessments for students that don't pass the Praxis 2 or their other assessment the first time, that if they were coming up with some sort of pilot program that would be cost-free to students, provide remediation in the student content area, and tell us what the assessment is going to be that meets these CAPE standards of validity and reliability, then that's something that I could consider. As it stands, I can't consider something where I don't know what the assessment is. So if you could open up the document that's called EPP Pilot Waiver, it's very brief.
Yep.
My idea with this is that if EPPs do want to have some sort of minimum content knowledge assessment waiver, that having some sort of, idea of what that is would make it easier for me to get behind. Because as a board, what we're supposed to be doing is finding alternative minimum content knowledge assessments. But my concern was in a document that just says the EPP will attest that the candidates know it. My concern was I need to know what the assessment is if we're approving this as a content knowledge assessment. And the idea of trusting the EPPs, but I think there's also trust and verify. Like we have high schools that are accredited under NEASC, and we know that when colleges and universities and scholarships looks for candidates, they also ask backup questions. They have other things they ask for in addition to the transcripts. So my proposal for the EPP waiver pilot would be for the programs that are interested, right? Because I understand not all programs would be interested in doing a waiver for content knowledge. An EPP that's at 95% probably will not spend their time and resources creating a brand new assessment that does meet state CAPE standards of validity. Right? So if we were to do that, I think it would make sense that the EPP will come up with some sort of program that's cost-free to students, that provides remediation in the content area. So if you were struggling in the elementary social studies, that you're given some sort of module, you're given some sort of support. Maybe the student audits like at one of the elementary ed classes at no cost. And then afterwards, maybe your EPP decides that that assessment will be a portfolio. Maybe they decide that the assessment will be like writing a unit plan for a social studies elementary like set of lessons. Okay. So my idea with this was to keep to people's sentiment of wanting to have an EPP waiver, but making sure that it's something where it's going to have EPPs be accountable for what that is. I can't vote yes to an alternate assessment if I don't know what the assessment is. And Madam Chair, I will take any questions on this proposal.
Okay, so we are, any questions on the proposal under, at this time? So I see Anne's got her hand raised. Go ahead, Anne.
It's more a comment than a question, but I do feel very strongly that EPPs under CAPE accreditation, the CAPE accreditation is extensive. I'm not so sure that everyone really gets how extensive it is and how much it's not just validity and reliability, but it's also our accreditation is based on proving that we have legitimate ways of assessing content knowledge as part of the meeting the standards. And so again, we're adding layers here. We're not streamlining, which is one of the things that we're being required to do. Whereas leaving it at the discretion of the EPP, knowing that there is oversight already through CAPE that's significant, allows us to streamline in the way that we really have been asked to do. I think, first of all, calling it a waiver is it's not a waiver. We're not waiving content knowledge. We're finding alternative ways to prove content knowledge. It is an extremely small number of people, and it doesn't preclude the EPP from still attesting to the legitimacy and the value of what they are doing as an alternative. That's all part of our accreditation. So it's not just trusting the EPP, it's trusting the EPP under the umbrella of CAPE, which I think is a really important distinction to make. And I don't feel that we need to do more or have another layer. That really goes against the streamline piece. Sorry. Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I respond? You're on mute, but I'll take that as a yes. So I think the problem is, so I like your comment that it shouldn't be called a waiver, because you're right, it is trying to show an alternate assessment. But in order to show that something is an alternative minimum content knowledge assessment, I don't feel comfortable voting for anything where we don't know what that assessment is. So if that assessment is already made and it has gone through, your CAPE standards of validity and reliability, and am I talking to another board member who isn't from an EPP? One of the things they mentioned was that every assessment has to go through this rigorous, CAPE review. So if that's already done and the documentation is already there, then I don't see the concern with showing it to us. Like, let me know what I am voting for as a member of this board. If you're already saying that you've gone through this long process with CAPE and it already meets these CAPE standards, then I don't see how this is a significant barrier. And it's certainly not a barrier to individual students, right? Because this pathway doesn't exist at all. So this would actually be opening the door to have EPPs who do want to have this alternate minimum content knowledge, giving them the approval to do so, as long as we know what we're approving, right? I can't say that, if it was a math content knowledge test, if I don't know what the alternatives that the EPP is proposing, I have a tough time saying to let that go.
Thank you. All right, next would be Dr. Ritchie.
Thank you. I feel like we're going kind of round and round, and the good news is that we're aligned very much. So we are very tight on trying to find alternative assessments, and it keeps going back and forth to responsibility of EPPs or school districts. I feel very strongly about if there is a need in content, instruction, content education, content knowledge, that we can't miss the part about what are we going to do to fill that gap. It can't just be 2 observations put in front of a classroom of kids and you get 2 observations and you're an expert. It's really important to me that we do something. So a creative idea could be, instead of deciding between EPP and school district, could we work in conjunction with the State Department? They have departments that are experts in the content areas. Could we leverage their expertise? It's only a small group of people. They can participate in virtual webinars that could be free of charge. And similar to, like the team program, maybe the alternative expectation to show mastery would be at the end of the year, after participating in 6 or so webinars, you become of a content expert. And I associate this to the state initiative of the science of reading, which was also co-sponsored by CAPS. And I'm sure, colleges too were part of it. We had college professors talk to us during it. So maybe instead of looking left or right, we look center, kind of the glue of the State Department, to make sure everyone's having high quality PD in a cost affordable way that we can all feel good about. Thank you.
Okay, Rebecca?
Dr. Ritchie, I really love that idea. That having the State Department content experts provide additional content webinars to support the content knowledge development is I think a great idea. I also just want to name the approach that we are considering is not an alternative assessment. It's an alternative approach. It's not another test. And so Kristen, I know you keep saying there's another test. It's not. We are actually developing alternative approaches to demonstrate content knowledge. And so, Dr. Ritchie, the approach you just shared is an alternative approach. This is also why I do not feel that an additional assessment is needed to be presented. I also want to name on the one, Kristen, that you have waivers coming through us as a CERT board, and on the approach that I shared. Once the attestation is signed, it goes directly to the State Department of Education and the license is issued. There's not a review of an additional bureaucratic entity. It's the EPP saying, yes, they have done the alternative approach, or in the states, the district says, yes, they have done the alternative approach. And then the teacher is streamlined. They get their license based on that document. There's no additional review for this minimum content knowledge alternative approach.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for Kristen? I see Lauren, if you could hold on, I'm going to listen to Dr. Rowe as a board member, and then I'll go over to you. Go ahead, Dr. Rowe. And
Okay,
I'm sorry, it'll be Dr. Rowe, Jenny Graves, and then Lauren.
Okay, so Dr. Good, thank you, Dr. Shell, and thank you, Dr. Ritchie. All great ideas. I absolutely agree. This is a pathway. It's not a waiver. So that's one thing. And I have to underscore what Dr. Deschelle said. We are going through, I'm at a Cape visit right now. We go through multiple measures and we have to demonstrate our effectiveness and efficiency in multiple realms, right? So if you understand the Cape standards, the advanced standards, and the initial standards, you have a really good understanding. Also, Cape information on an institution is available on our website. So that's something else, that information is public knowledge. All right. But what I'd like to say is that, you know, we have been going around and around, so I don't want to see us go to the CSDE and start all over with content knowledge. We're already doing that with the Praxis Bridge. That's what the Praxis Bridge is. It's a pathway. It's giving you that content. That's what that is. So we don't need CSDE to create something that already exists. We have the Praxis Bridge, and that is the same pathway as what Dr. Ritchie is describing. And I'm not going to speak for the capacity of the CSDE to pull something like that together, but when we have a partner, ETS, that's willing and in this process, I think we should rely on that, and that could be our alternate pathway, if you will. And I have to apologize today. I'm jumping in and out because I'm at another site's Cape review. So thank you.
All right, we'll go with Jenny Graves, and I think Elsa just posted something into the chat for a question. I think I got a notification for. All right, so Chris, who did I say was next? Oh, Jenny Graves. Go ahead, Jenny.
I really appreciated Kristen's, I'm not going to call it a waiver, but Kristen's proposal. I don't think it's very labor intensive for EPPs to share what their plan is with us. It's not as though we are asking for that rubric or that pathway for each individual person who's seeking that. I mean, how many EPPs are there in the state? 19, 20? For each of them to tell us, like, yeah, we're either going to do it or we're not going to do it. And if we do it, this is our plan. I think the job of this board is to have a little bit of oversight and to know what EPPs are offering people seeking certification. So I'm definitely in support of the proposal that Kristen brought.
Okay, I think Elsa's was the same question as Dr. Rose. So thank you. I hope that was answered for you. And thank you, Jenny Grave. Now we're going to go over to Lauren from FDE.
My thoughts are a little jumbled, but I did want to speak up. I think one of the challenges with the conversations around the alternative approaches is that you're looking at alternatives for the end of a process for an individual. But part of the work of this board is determining what is going to be required of each educator preparation program, because the current regulations that they were built upon are sunset as of July 1, 2026. So at this point, the CERT board doesn't actually know what that new version of each program is going to be. That's part of the work of this board, is determining for each individual certification area, what are the content-specific requirements? And also, because program approval regulations are set to be sunset, what is that process going to be? Because it's important. People talk a lot about CAPE accreditation, but what's really important is CAPE accreditation is broad for the entire educator preparation provider, and each individual certification area is its own program. So when there's discussions of alternative measures and waivers, it's important to note that we use the term content area assessment, but it's not a singular content area assessment. Every individual endorsement area has its own body of knowledge and national content standards that those, assessments then are predicated on. So I think you're in a tricky spot having these conversations about the exit for individual applicants. And to all of the individuals' points, you're talking about a small number who don't meet the stated requirements, and coming up with alternative measures for those individuals makes sense, but there's a difference between the entity being accredited and the individual being eligible for certification. So I think it's tricky looking at these waivers because, again, that's the exit for the individual who doesn't meet the current requirements. But this board has quite a bit of work determining what those requirements are going to be. So I don't know where that sits with everything, but I think it needs to be named that you all have to determine admission requirements, content requirements for each discipline, because there is a difference between, you know, what somebody needs to know to be an art teacher and what somebody needs to know, you know, to be a physics teacher. And how is all of that going to be looked at? And I know Dr. Ritchie had mentioned, you know, pardon me, the science of reading. You know, there's that foundations of reading assessment that's utilized by multiple endorsement areas. So thinking about alternative measures in lieu of standardized assessments just has a fair amount of complexity to it. And I think you're just in a tough spot kind of looking at all this waiver language without any of those other parts being determined yet. And I know there was a question in the chat about the bridge. I think it's also important to note that that's something that ETS creates relative to their different praxis assessments. So they have a timeline for when they're going to be rolling out additional ones.
And that information was shared with the board earlier this month.
Correct.
So with the timeline information following their EPP update on there. All right, and thank you for that. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Dr. Ritchie, is it okay if we kind of wrap up the conversation right now, or is it something super pressing so that we can move on to the next waiver? Because then we're going to have to consider all three of these, and then we still have to go to the birth to third grade. So I just wanted to double check if that's something that is, if maybe we can email Kristen a question, or if it's something, or if we want her to go to the next one. Well, we can't hear you.
Can I just make a quick statement without discussion, maybe some homework to synthesize? Again, trying to streamline, and I don't work at the college level, but I am wondering, could it be possible where students who are enrolled in college take the praxis as part of their exit exams from the course? So, you know, like you don't pass the course until you're there and you have remediation already. So we don't get to this point ever. So I don't need an answer, just dreaming big ideas out there. How can we consolidate and perhaps stop the problem before it arrives to us through remediation at the college level? Thank you.
That would be a good thing to bring to the regs ad hoc as, you know, possible discussion when we get to that point in the regulations where we're looking at the EPP information in there as it's relevant to the sunsetting regs, which are the first ones that we are tackling. All right, thank you. So we're going to go ahead and close up discussion. The idea being that we will move that to the October one, and then let's move into the superintendent's one. Just for the purpose of timekeeping, let's try to keep this within the next 10 to 15 minutes so that we can move into the other components. Our birth to third grade people have been waiting patiently, and I appreciate your patience in relation to that. It's very good discussion and questions being had by all. All right, so the next one, Karen, can you pull that one up, which is the superintendent waiver proposal?
Yep, it is called 2025-09 Superintendent Waiver Proposal. And yes, I understand waiver is not the right word for it, but in this particular proposal, what I'm thinking is that we all agree that Praxis 2 Bridge is providing an alternate pathway that provides, you know, some remediation of content knowledge and an assessment. When I was thinking about the number of candidates, like the number of teachers that I know that work under a DSAP that have met every other requirement except for content knowledge, these are ones that have already left their EPP, so the EPP waiver proposal may not be suitable for them, right? And they're already working under a DSAP. For those candidates that don't have a Praxis 2 Bridge available, that can't just go online and finish up their content knowledge, I would like that these teachers are able to apply for a waiver through the State Department of Education. And it would only be for the ones who have completed all other requirements for initial certification, score within 1 SEM of the PUD score, and don't have a Praxis 2 Bridge in their area. So right now, there's about 500, if I'm not mistaken, teachers working under a DSAP right now. That means that their district has already gone through the process of filling out the paperwork so they can work under a DSAP. These are districts that are willing to employ and work with candidates that are not fully certified, right? If those districts were willing to do this step, to have them work under a DSAP, then they'd also be able to, after 1 year of teaching and 2 content-specific observations by the superintendent or designee, attest to their district content knowledge. And actually, Anne asked a question to Rebecca earlier about a similar proposal. I was actually thinking for this that the end person who is suggesting certification is not the EPP, but the superintendent, in the same way the 90-day cert works for ARC graduates. So right now for ARC graduates, once Jen Delaney's students are all done and they go through the program, their superintendent has to certify essentially that those students complete student teaching. And my waiver proposal, my attestation proposal, in my proposal, I'm proposing that the superintendent and their designee would be attesting to their minimum content knowledge as the last step. So EPPs, I know a question that people had before was, how can we attest to their content knowledge when they haven't been in our program in 4 years, right? Because the superintendent would be working with them, or obviously the superintendent's designee would be working with them. Probably, I'm imagining your content area director would be working with this candidate, doing these observations. And the third-party verification that they do know content knowledge is they are getting a close score with the 1 SEM. In an earlier presentation, not today, Ajit had said that somewhere between 40 and 50% of candidates are within that 1 SEM of cut score. And while I don't have that data in front of me, if we're saying there's 500 teachers working under a DSAP right now, and 250 of them could benefit from this program, then I think this is a program that we should seriously consider. Now, some of those might be ones that could go back and take the Praxis 2 bridge. And we know that the EPPs have been doing some work doing the webinars, getting people to know that Praxis 2 bridge is available. But I think if superintendents had some way of saying these candidates that scored within 1 SEM of their cut score and have been working hard for us, they've done their content knowledge in their classrooms, they're showing that they can teach the things, that I feel like that should be one pathway that we consider. So I do know that Cynthia, you had asked about the 10 hours of content, not the content specific PD. And the reason that I felt that needed to be removed is I remember being a first year teacher with a 9-month-old baby, and I don't know where I would have fit 10 hours of additional PD in. And I'm not exactly sure where that money would have come from, but I do appreciate that when we had this discussion, that PD and the idea that your supervisor would be working to provide you with that. I do think that that should still be a part of it. And because the superintendent or designee would be working with this candidate as an employee, that is still something that the district can choose to have them do.
Right, thank you for your presentation. Is there any questions to Kristen about this particular proposal? Dr. Ritchie?
Thank you, Kristen. I just wanted to respond that when I was thinking of PD, I wasn't thinking of extra PD. I was thinking of, again, trying to streamline and merge the systems that we have in place together. So with the new teacher evaluation plan that was recently put into legislation and approval last year, we could assume that teachers that are hired but need to fill this content gap would agree that this would be their goal. So then when everyone is doing their professional journey of learning, they would work with their supervisor to make sure that they are finding free, available, high quality PD. Virtually maybe be great regionally if we can bring people together that have the same need and share in services. And again, I still want to say through the State Department content, where if it's just a handful and there are virtual meetings held all the time, I get to benefit from working with the State Department when we have alliance meetings, commissioner network meetings, so forth and so on. It would be great to share the wealth because others that could learn in those gaps, there's tons of resources in Connecticut that could help. Thank you.
All right. Are there any other
And can I
questions
respond?
for? Oh, sure. Go ahead, Kristen.
Yeah. No, and that would be great, having those like statewide or regional resources, or like Sarah Fitzsimon says in the chat, the rest could provide professional learning. And, you know, with, as you mentioned, the new teacher evaluation plan, one of the things is that that's supposed to be a mutually agreed upon goal between the teacher and their supervisor. But what if their first year's goal, like my first year's goal was classroom management, right? What if their goal that the supervisor that's working with them directly and the teacher decide to work on is they have to work on classroom management first, and then their district supervisor who does content would be working with them to do their observations. It's just tying it to TVAL is a little tricky because TVAL has to be mutually agreed upon. So I was thinking of that too. So thank you.
All right, Rebecca, good.
Kristen, do you envision taking your two proposals here and then putting them into the bottom section of the proposal that I've set forth? Or are you seeking that these two proposals are like standalone?
Go ahead, Kristen. Respond to that.
Yeah. So at this time, with your two proposals, I wouldn't be able to vote yes in good conscience because for the EPP one, I have concerns about the having similar pathways and assessments within each EPP. Like I would want more information on that. So I'm proposing these as separate from the two that you have. So I did wanted to keep the same structure where we had been talking about like interest in an EPP pathway and interest in a superintendent pathway. So that's why yours and mine are so similar.
I respect. I don't think you're answering my question. I respect that you, in all good conscience, you don't want to vote for the other one. My question for you is the groups on the top of mine. They like that is before, that comes before the district editation and EPP editation.
Group 1 and group 2.
Yeah, group 1 and group 2. So this right here is just for group 2. That this current proposal that we're looking at does not recognize a group 3. Is that true or false? Am I understanding that correct?
So for group 3, I just need a reminder on what is in yours. So
I can read it to you. So it says.
No, I got it.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah. So group 3 is candidates who do not pass, who aren't eligible for a bridge. So no, this does recognize that there are people who aren't eligible for a bridge, because there are lots of people who aren't eligible for a bridge because bridge only covers a handful of tests. And I know that ETS is working to have bridges for a whole bunch of options. And as they come on board, there's going to be more and more. But this does recognize that there are candidates who don't pass the test, right? Because they have failed within one SEM, and therefore aren't available for a bridge option or don't have a bridge option available.
Okay, so the difference is I have a group that if they did not score within one SEM, that we have an option for them. you're saying if you don't score within one SEM, there is no option for you. That's how I'm reading your waiver. Or is that accurate?
Yeah, so there
Okay.
actually
That's all
are
I needed.
lots of
Yes,
options.
that's all I needed. I know we were
Yeah.
short on time. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah. No, but there's lots of options. So there was the EPP, there was the transcript experience, there was the waiver that goes to SBE. There are lots of options that are besides the waivers proposed. And the reason that I didn't include group one and group two is that those are already set. We've already agreed upon those. So these would be covering a different set of candidates than either group one or group two.
Okay, Dr. Ritchie, do you have a question?
Can I make a motion to make an addition to this?
Right now, we're just discussing, but if you want to make the, like any amendments we would do would be when we go to vote on it. So if we decided to vote moving forward, but you can give a suggestion to Kristen, but we're
Sure.
not voting on it at this time.
Okay. If I may, my suggestion would be to add another bullet to say candidates or teachers, because they would be already placed in the classroom in this situation, will participate in a full day professional development offering during the regional PD day in November, which is usually a shared day offered by either RESCs or the State Department. Thank you.
Can I just respond to that?
Sure, go ahead, Kristen.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I'm so sorry. In my district, we're not allowed to go to any RESC PD. We're only allowed to go to district PD, and they don't let us go to anywhere else.
But I think that's the job of this committee, is to open new doors and see what's available. I know our arts and music and, our essentialists oftentimes do have the opportunity to get together. And if this is just a handful of people at no charge, and it is a day where school is closed, we might have some opportunity here to benefit a lot of people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're going to close, barring any other questions for Kristen, we're going to close discussion. All three waivers should go back to your organizations for review and feedback. We will put them on the October meeting to vote on, to take action on all three. All right. Next, we have on the agenda. All right. The birth to grade 3 regulations language. This language will be very familiar to us. We have looked it over in the past. I think there was just some adjustments made to it. So I am going to hand this over to Paige to present along with Tong, I believe. Some CPRO members are here as well for questions. Once they've presented, go ahead and drop into the comments whether you're speaking for or against it. And then we can kind of move the discussion forward. And it's one of our items to take action on today. So once we're done with discussion, we can also move into the action standpoint as part of our flexible schedule. So Paige, are you there?
Yes, hi.
Hi, thank you.
Appreciate the invigorating conversation.
Karen,
I think
can you
Tom
switch
talked-
over to the proposal?
That's what I was going to ask, yeah. So I think I'm just here to say we've all reviewed this and there is not change since we last addressed it, except for a component about who's going to work on the guidelines and section 3, and out of a generative conversation, also adding the early interventionist early childhood special education standards. So at high level, those are the changes. I will pass to the lawyers or just open for questions, I guess.
Yeah, we don't have anything to add. I think that's right. So just those two changes, sort of minor technical changes.
Happy to walk through anything, but appreciate people might just need to look.
Yeah, Karen, can you pull it up on the screen? It is called sent to CERT board update 9/28/12A3 ECE draft regulations. Can you make it a little bit bigger for anyone who might be viewing it on the screen?
And just a reminder, the brackets are removal, which has typically been grayed out for folks.
Dawn, can you remind us one more time, now that we have it up in front of us, what was changed from the original time that it was presented?
Yeah, sure. So I think in terms of what was changed, really two things. One, I think, as Paige mentioned in section 3, you scroll down, and there is a bit on, it's just basically another, and I'll let Paige speak to the substantive aspects of those standards, but there's another standard, another set of standards added after. So the last draft ended at the National Association for the Education of Young Children. That's echoing what 2441 have already put in place, but just I guess for good order, we included that as well. And there's this early interventionist, early childhood special educator standards that I think, given the breadth of this new certification, it's appropriate to include as well. So that's one change. And then the second change is, if you scroll down to just a bit further, pass out the gray, sorry, it's down a little bit more until where it's, sorry, wait, is it, it must be up, sorry. I missed it. So the part where the board is tasked to develop guidelines, like we just like Control F guidelines to find that section. It might just be following, just following that, like section 3. Yeah, here, there we go. Yeah. So previously, I think it was kind of like tasked on the board to develop guidelines. Having spoken to, Paige and Sun Chen and people from the early childhood circles, it was we kind of thought it would be good to make the role of the board to approve guidelines and then specify who is involved in the creation of the guidelines itself. Obviously, as you see, it will involve people, representatives from the CSDE, from the board, from the CERT board as well, from the Office of Early Childhood, and sort of Pages Consortium, to kind of form kind of like a working group to deliberate and then finally agree on guidance. And this is, I guess, reflective of the fact that these guidance will be, I think, require some form of like substantive and sort of expert knowledge in this area, and also all the different perspectives that this board, CSDE, brings as well, and sort of Office of Early Childhood. So that's just basically codifying that group. And obviously, so that's the new part. So basically from M- to M-, that's the new part. Page on it.
Just it was the dialogue with Lauren and Kaylin and the rest of other people who have been in this work to overtly add the early interventionist standards so that that was
Alright.
clear for the special ed. Yeah.
Okay, so there was the section 3 that was kind of just now we talked about, and so this is the other new you know, addition, and I think that's it.
All right, is there any questions for Tong or Paige or the team? I did make note that at the bottom of the page, it says that there are 2 regulations are repealed. The regulations board, under the understanding that the regulations ad hoc in this board may be making adjustments to that in the future as part of the sunsetting work. All right, seeing no other questions. Now what we have is this on the table for action. So the action would be to, I would cater a motion to approve this and move it forward. Oh, Dr. Ritchie, sorry, go ahead.
I'm so sorry, and then I may have missed this, but this is only for initial certification. It can't be enacted for cross endorsement to someone who's already certified. Is that correct? Or can it be applicable to someone who's already certified and wants cross endorsement?
My understanding is that due to the special ed nature of it, that there are other guidelines that are required. So this would be initial certification is my understanding, but I will ask Paige and Tong and Julianne to kind of speak to that. So Julianne, go ahead.
The thing I just wanted to mention is that the requirements for initial certification, which is my understanding, this is a new endorsement, are different than the requirements for cross endorsement. And so this is the initial certification, just like if you want to be certified in math, you need a whole math program. If you want to add a cross endorsement in math and you're already certified in another area, all you need is the test. They're vastly different. So this would be the initial certification.
All right, I see a hand from Kaylin. Would you like also to answer that?
Yes, I completely agree with what Julianne. This is first time issuance of an initial educator certificate. The information that is in this document will help guide our EPPs to be able to create programming. Like consider it like a page in the regs of regulations that are just, speaking specifically to early childhood education. As part of the regs, cross endorsement have their own areas in the regulations, but once this initial piece is put forward, we did have cross endorsement legislation that passed for early childhood in 2023, 7/1/23. It could be something that we could revisit when we're comparing different, but cross endorsement is a separate area as a part of the regs, and we do have a lot of statute that contributes to our cross endorsement requirements.
Thank you. Lauren, I see your hand up as well.
Yep, I just wanted to reiterate, even though this is for initial certification, the change that this will make will eliminate the 112 certificate and the 113 certificate and create one new combined birth to grade 3 certificate. So some of the thinking will have to take place to determine what will be required of a cross endorsement, because the current cross endorsement rules, if you will be for certifications that no longer exist. Because if this goes forward, the 112 and the 113 won't exist, and this new thing will exist in its place. So whatever work that's created around this initial certification, probably you'll want that same group to do some thinking about what would a candidate need to be eligible for this new endorsement as a cross endorsement, because the current one won't have taken into account the larger grade span, which is significantly different.
I'm just checking really quickly to see if Representative Leeper is still here on the line, because one of the questions that she had asked was, when we had the update, was along the lines of whether or not the other ones would still exist. And yes, they would still exist for renewal. The 112 and the 113, and then moving forward, it would be reissuance. And the 112 or the 113 was a birth to something, and then a pre-K to something else. I don't remember what the ranges are specifically in my own mind right now, but it kind of encapsulates the two into one to provide more flexibility. But those who held the previous would still have reissuance, correct? Like other certifications.
That's correct. As long as
Right,
they
but to
maintain
add
the
the
certificate.
certificate.
As long as they maintain the certificate, yes, they can hold it. And another thing that this group, really might want to take a look at is, what kind of transition can those who already hold it make with minimal, not as strenuous effort, so to speak.
Like what kind of courses they would have to
Yeah,
take
like
to
what
kind
can
of
we
get
do to
to that.
expand? How can I change what I have? Oh, that's what I want now, and in kind of like a grandfather clause, but maybe not as, the requirements might not be as strenuous for someone who already has it and has been working in that area.
Because to give as an example, my understanding was that the grade 1 to 6 certification that went down to pre-K, anyone who was 1 to 6 and wanted to renew, they just could renew with no additional ones. But because of the sensitivity and the requirements from that special ed component of this one, there may be additional course requirements that we might want to have. So they wouldn't be able to just trade it in for a new one.
That's
Okay.
right. We're talking
All right.
about the ones that already hold those integrated certificates, that already have that special education piece, but like you said, they have the 112 or the 113.
All right, Jenny Graves, I see your hand is up.
Oh, sorry. I'll put it down because that was my question. As somebody who currently holds the 113, I would be interested in what other requirements I would need to do in order to teach special ed K3. But yeah, great. Thank you.
And correct me if I'm wrong, there's some language in here talking about coming up with guidelines. I think I see it right there. Such guidelines shall include requirements for any program teacher preparation leading to certification in the endorsement area. So there is still additional steps to be done, but this is just the regulatory language. And then there's follow-up on guidelines and protocol within that. Anne, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I just wondered from Paige and some of the others how I understand this one, but with the new extended band of pre-K through 6, do they see any overlap there? Do they see do they have concerns relative to that extended band and this separate certification?
Hi, Ann. I would just speak
Paige,
to the
go ahead.
fact that, I would speak to the fact that this makes sure that we're specifically paying attention to early childhood special education, early intervention. So the developmentalness of it, the way that the pre-K was added to elementary doesn't require understanding of development of young children. And even pre-K being added to special ed doesn't acknowledge this is part of why we put the early intervention standards in there. It actually looks distinctive, maybe not wildly different, but there are nuances there that are particularly a body of knowledge and competency that are important for children of that age. So I think it does what we need and what the CERT board's been doing, which is in these bigger spans, understand what are the skills and competencies needed to effectively address children in that span. Hope that helps.
Thanks,
All right,
Paige.
thank you. And then Lauren and Julianne, and then we'll wrap this up and we'll move on to the vote.
Oh, I'll defer to Julianne because my thing was just to draw attention to something that she wrote.
Okay, and I just wanted to point out, in case people weren't seeing in the chat, that the ability to maintain an older endorsement, that's one of the areas that's been marked for sunsetting. That the board's going to have to consider that. So right now, someone who had an old 006, you could still maintain that endorsement unless it expired. That's being taken away, and I hope that we will be able to continue to have someone who has a 112 or a 113 to continue to maintain that. It's just the idea of this new one is that any new endorsements would be the new span of birth to 3 for special ed and
Right,
regular ed.
thank you. So at this time, barring any further discussion or questions, the action to be taken on this is to approve this regulatory language and move it forward to SBE for their approval or to the policy office and then to SBE for their approval as well. So do I have a motion to approve this waiver to move it to the next step of the Policy Committee. Margaret,
Make a motion to approve the proposal as written and move it forward.
do I have a second?
Kristen Besega, I'll second.
All right, is there any discussion around this? Or debate? I should say, discussion already happened, so is there any debate on this? All right, Karen, can you take a roll call vote on this, please? If you'd like, I can call off the names really quickly and you just kind of mark them down.
Sure.
All right, Jen Rodriguez, yes. Cynthia Ritchie, I think she had to step away. Kristen?
Yes.
Cynthia supports.
Elsa?
She put it in the chat.
You know, but they have to be on camera voting for a roll call, but thank you. Noted. Kristen? That was a yes, right?
Yes, that was yes.
Elsa?
Yes. Yes.
Tiffany?
Yes.
Jen Delaney is not here. And Deshelle?
Yes.
All right. Sarah?
Yes.
Rebecca?
Yes.
Jenny?
Yes.
Margaret?
Yes.
Shannon?
Yes.
Patrice?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
Bob? And Deputy Commissioner Cynthia.
Yes.
All right, the motion carries. This will move over to the Policy Committee, and if they approve it and don't send it back to us, then it will move forward to the State Board of Education and move forward. And Karen, once it's gone through the proposal, or I'm sorry, I think we have something on for October. We requested a date, correct?
Yes.
So if we are approved to be on their agenda for October, there might be a request to have some members of the group attend the meeting and kind of field any questions that they might have on the particular proposal. Once they approve it, then it would move forward to State Board of Education for them to approve. So fingers crossed for November for approval to move that forward. All right, back to our agenda then. The next thing that we have on our agenda is, by the way, thank you, Paige and CPRL and all the folks who worked on this. You guys have been working hard and you're very patient during the meeting today. We appreciate your patience and the work and effort put into this. Also knowing that it's not entirely over and there's still more work to be done. So we appreciate you. Thank you. Next on here is our meeting schedule for action. So it was sent to you, the virtual meeting data that we received. So if you take a look, there's two documents. There's the updated 2025 meeting schedule, which is highlighted in yellow to reflect the changes that was sent out. Karen, are you able to pull that one up?
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry, the 2025 and the 2026 agenda was included in your materials. Kristen, while we're waiting for that to come up, did you have a comment on it? I can't hear you.
Thank you. I just wanted to appreciate that the dates in the winter are all virtual, which will be really helpful if there's snowy weather or things for us all trying to get to Hartford. I know that some people drive from really far. I also like that in the 2026 meeting dates that we've already taken into account spring break and Indigenous Peoples Day. So I think it's pretty straightforward.
Okay. So barring any discussion, this is the 2025 and take a quick look. So we are currently in that September 8th. The next two meetings will be in person at the State Department of Education, and the December meeting will be virtual. There will not be a hybrid option at this time. Rebecca, go ahead.
I propose that the March 9th meeting for 2026 also be moved to virtual for the weather potential.
The motion, we can certainly carry the motion, but just for full transparency, it was based off of the survey data that the board provided. And if, let me take a quick look at what the kind of look on that was, just to give you an idea. All right, so that was the March 2026 you said, Rebecca?
No, March 9th. Oh yeah, 2026. I thought you meant March 9th.
Summary. So March 9th, 2026 was a 7-5 vote for in person. I'm happy to cater a motion should the board want to reconsider that.
I would like to make a motion for just the board to reconsider and put March 9th to a virtual meeting. I think we do. We operate in virtual just as we do in person, but just getting ahead of any weather.
Okay. The other option too. Oh, I'm sorry.
Can
Did I hear a second?
Yeah, I'm sorry. For clarification, was it just for March, or were we re-evaluating whether or not we wanted virtual or in person? Just based on
No,
this.
I was just saying, just flip March 9th to virtual instead of in person, just that one date change. That's all I was making a motion for.
That would put us with 4 virtual days or 4 virtual meetings in a row, just as for full clarity, because the December 2025 is virtual, January, February, and then March would also be virtual. So it'd be 4 meetings in a row that are virtual, just for perspective. Because I know there was some discussion at the last meeting about trying to like mix it up a little bit. So do we have a second for Rebecca's motion?
Rowe, second.
Dr. Rowe has seconded Dr. Good's motion. Is there any discussion? All right, let's take a vote. Raise your hand if you'd like to change the March 9th, 2026 meeting to virtual. Click a raised hand at this time. So we have Dr. Good, Dr. Deschel, Kristen, Jenny Graves, Deputy Commissioner Cynthia, Shannon, Tiffany. Looks like Elsa's got a hand raised. All right, so that is 8, 9 in favor. Are there any against? Will everybody unselect their hand? Right, any against virtual at this time? I think it's
Sorry.
Patrice that has hers against that. Is it just Patrice? Catherine, I think you voted in favor of.
Get my hand down.
Oh, okay. So it looks like just Patrice right now. And Deputy Commissioner, are you in favor or against at this time?
In favor.
Okay. You're in favor. Okay, so it just looks like one. So the motion is passed. So we'll update that. So with the update, I need a motion to accept the schedule for 2025 and 2026 with the March update.
So moved.
So moved.
So moved.
Oh, so many so moved. So I feel like I got a second in those 3 or 4 so moves. Thank you. So all in favor, go ahead and raise your hand now. All right, so we have Jenny and going in the number order that it's listed here. We've got Elsa, we've got Tiffany, we've got Patrice. Sarah, Shannon. I think we have everyone, including myself. So the motion passes except for Catherine Rowe, correct? Okay. So the motion passes as stated. Thank you for your help on that. All right. And then let's just take a look at the agenda. New waiver proposals, great. So next action items, just based on the notes that I took really quickly. Here is a list of ad hocs and members, review of the work of Vision Ad Hoc Section 14 and the vision, review of pathways flow chart for the next meeting. That's going to go on the October meeting. Summary of current 5 waivers and denials to the board. And I think those are the action items I have listed here, but I'm sure that Karen will pick up any additional ones in her meeting minutes. If everyone can unselect their hand briefly, just to make sure that it's accurate. And then if there's anything else, I will request that at that time. Okay, perfect. Karen, is there anything else on your end that we need clarity on?
Yes, just briefly, back to the Robert's Rules of Order. So there was a question Dr. Good posed about informal consideration, and that's in section 52.3, where it's covered, and it's usually used in smaller meetings. And all it actually does, like Dr. Good was saying, it removes the normal limitations on the number of times members can speak in debate, right? But it's normally not done when you have a very full agenda, when you have limited time on an agenda. But it is an option that is available if the chair moves to allow that.
It's not based on if the chair moves it to allow.
Well, it says the regular
to be clear.
presiding officer remains in the chair. So
Right, unless we go to a committee of working group. But I mean, we can check. We can check into about it later, since it was my individual, and I don't want to move people past 4.
Okay. And was there anything else, or?
Yes, actually, yes. A point of order that Dr. Deschelle was mentioning is really not a point of order, because it's really a point of inquiry, where you can ask question, like could the chair ask a question?
I apologize, Karen. I misspoke.
No. This is a learning curve, so it's no apologies needed. Point of order is when a board member asks the chair to speak to a member that is speaking out of turn. So that is what a point of order is used for, according to Robert's rules.
And just for full clarity, as part of my responsibilities as the chair and having not chaired a group before, I have gotten myself a parliamentary mentor to assist me in kind of reflecting on the meetings, ensuring that I'm doing my duty as chair, and ensuring that we have equity in voices, and moving the meetings through the processes that need to be done. So I do want you to know that I do have somebody who I do refer back to and ask questions of, and kind of reflect on my own practice, as any good educator does, and ensuring that I move the work forward for the chair in that way. So thank you all. I believe that is, we've touched on everything, and we are only 2 minutes over. So well done, everyone on the board. Thank you so much for your help and your work as we continue this work. We will follow up with some emails on additional meeting information, including ad hocs and what have you. So thank you again, and we'll see you all soon.
Thanks all.
Oh, I need a motion to adjourn. My apologies.
Yes, motion.
Second.
All right, all in favor, raise that hand. All right, it looks like we are passed. Thank you. And have a good weekend. We'll see you all soon, or good week, and we'll see you all soon.